Hello, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black Live, the one and only show on the internet where myself, Dan Selcke of winterscoming.net, and Daniel Rowan of winterscoming.com talk all things sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TV, books, dragons, author fights. What else are we talking about today?
We're talking about
people, work-life balance, and people trapped underground in post-apocalyptic silos.
yes.
Hello, Victor.
Yes.
Hello, Julie. Good to see you. Hello, Daniel. How you doing?
Hello. I am good. I'm both excited and a little what's the word I want? Intrepid.
Trepidatious?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little not anxious, but we've got some exciting, fun stuff to talk about today. We've got some heavy stuff. There's a lot of trailers that drop too that we'll probably mention here and there, but we're not really going to break down all these trailers because there's too many and we already had a show planned. So yeah, I'm good. How are you, Dan? How's life, the universe, and everything?
Not bad at all. Yeah, it's true. I was kind of flipping up top, but we do actually have some heavy topics to talk about today. But first, a lighter one. I'd like to begin this show by bringing you some news of a Kendrick Drake-like feud, but in the world of fantasy publishing. So there's an author named George R.R. Martin. He wrote the Song of Ice and Fire books, created Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, all that good stuff. And then there is a much lesser known author named Larry Correia, is it? Who has a series of books called the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior. And the basic news is it's a funny little thing to chuckle about on a Wednesday afternoon that Larry Correia released a new book in his series, Heart of the Mountain, or is going to. I believe it comes out in February. And, on the dedication page of a book, if you take the time to write a book and you get to dedicate it to somebody, usually the dedications are, to my spouse for putting up with me while I wrote all this, to my kids for giving me joy, to my family, to my friends, to my fans who make this all possible. Larry Correia wrote in the dedication to his new book, and I quote, "To George R.R. Martin, see, it wasn't that hard," mocking Martin for writing The Winds of Winter, the sixth book in his A Song of Ice and Fire series, for the past 13 years without getting it out. And I wasn't sure whether to see that and think about, oh, that's funny, or, oh, that's kind of petty and weird. And then you look into it and you learn that Larry Correia and George R.R. Martin actually had a bit of an internet feud back in the 2015 over the Hugo Awards, which is a whole big nerdy mishigas. You might be able to summarize for us, Daniel, quickly, because you're more tapped into what happened than I was. Quickly-ish. Let's not get derailed into an hour-long discussion of the Hugo Award controversy of 2015.
Yeah, which you could totally spend that amount of time talking about it, but we're not going to do that. So kind of in a nutshell, Larry Correia was one of the people behind this movement called the Sad Puppies, which essentially did slate voting for the Hugos. They had a slate of people they wanted to get on the ballot because they felt that the people who usually voted for the Hugos were only doing it for politically like-minded people. It was too cliquish. There were people who they felt deserved recognition that weren't getting recognition. And I don't know where Larry Correia got this, but basically the thing that stuck in his craw was this idea that the Hugos were an award for all fandom. The fans vote for the Hugos. And really the Hugos are like the people who go to Worldcon vote for the Hugos, which is kind of it's a lot of peers and editors and authors.
It's like the Oscars or the Emmys or any award show.
A little bit more open than that, because anyone can buy a membership to Worldcon and vote on it. But your average person going to pick up a book at the store and then not being wicked keyed into this stuff is not voting at Worldcon. So Larry Correia organized a bunch of people to vote for his candidates, basically, that he was saying these are the right ones. And part of what made it very controversial was he had this guy Vox Day on the ballot, and Vox Day got kicked out of the Science Fiction Writers of America Association for being racist, making racist remarks against N.K. Jemisin. So it was a whole giant can of worms. But yeah, when you wrote this story about this whole book dedication thing, I too was like, is this petty? Is this goofy? What's the deal with this? And then looking into it, it's like, oh, this goes back to 2015 where these two had beef. Okay, I get it now.
So it's petty. It's this man reviving this like 10-year warmed over internet drama and using the dedication page to kind of try and revive it and call it out. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, which of course has gotten him probably more attention than he would have gotten otherwise for this book.
Smart.
Which he seems to be enjoying. I made the mistake of looking at his Twitter. He's a very opinionated guy. I don't agree with a lot of his opinions. But yeah, so it's a whole thing right now. It's a small, petty, silly thing. He did say something that I think is interesting, though. And I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but basically when this came up and he's been talking with fans, and he basically said his real beef with George R.R. Martin, more than the whole Sad Puppies thing, because apparently they kind of buried the hatchet on that personally. But to him, he says that George R.R. Martin, and this is a quote, burned an entire generation of readers by never finishing his series, which in turn made a lot of readers stop reading series that were only half finished. Do you think that's true, Dan?
Probably.
Fair. I will say, as much as I disagree with a lot of the things Larry Correia says, I actually do think he's right about this. And he's blogged about this, that it's more than just Martin. It was kind of a few authors at around the same time. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss is the other big one, who wrote these books that were very, very popular and just never finished their series. I worked in a bookstore around the time that those series were very large, and I used to hear that all the time from people who came in, like, I'm not going to start a series that's not finished because Martin and I literally had people say Martin and Rothfuss burned me. So like, there's probably some truth to that, honestly.
Yeah. Julie asks, have you read any of these books? Are they any good? I have not. Have you ever read Larry Correia?
I have not. My question for you, Julie, is how much you like guns and right-wing political views, because from what I have gathered, both from my own just research and also from like seeing people talking about this on Reddit, Correia is like, he's a gun nut. He's very passionate about it. No shade for me personally. Like, I think we have issues with it in the United States, but I'm not anti-gun. I live in the woods, so we don't need to talk about that. But the point is, he's very forward with his views, almost to the point of being a little ham-fisted, is what I've heard. So it really depends on your taste. But I will tell you, I'm not planning on reading any of them anytime soon.
So yeah, a fun little bit of drama to start your day.
Yeah.
The next story is quite a bit more serious. So speaking of authors, drama, this goes quite a bit deeper. A lot of you probably already know that Neil Gaiman, the author of The Sandman, author of Good Omens, author of a lot of very popular books and comic books from the past, like 30
decades.
Plus years at this point, decades. One of the big figures has been embroiled in a, let's say, scandal involving him pressing unwanted sexual advances on women for a while now. And it got a new chapter recently because of a Vulture article. Daniel, what happened?
Yeah, so this is a thing, we're not going to recount all of the things with the Neil Gaiman accusations, because honestly, we couldn't. We could be here for a while doing it and still miss.
It's a very long article. I'll put it in the chat if you guys want to read it.
That's a good idea. And basically last July, several women came forward with accusations of like sexual abuse against Neil Gaiman. It was on a fairly like a startup podcast that kind of did it in almost a true crime sort of way. So it didn't get a ton of steam when it first came out. And basically Vulture and New York Magazine, which is the picture that we have up on the screen right now for audio listeners, they basically published a very lengthy expose on this story. They spoke to 4 of those women who came forward, as well as 4 others who had similar experiences. They spoke to authors who know Gaiman. They spoke to musicians who are friends of his wife, who will soon be his ex-wife, Amanda Palmer. They're in the middle of like a 5-year, very bitter divorce. And basically, I will give the trigger warning if anyone hasn't read this and is thinking about reading this article. It is extremely graphic. Extremely graphic descriptions of what some of these women went through with him that are frankly pretty disturbing. And I don't say that to shade like basically one of the kind of accusations in here is like he inflicted some BDSM, so like sadomasochism type of practices on people, like without asking their consent, which like if you know anything about that community, like consent is a very integral part of that particular like kink subculture. Like the article is called "There's No Safe Word," so that kind of puts across the tenor a little bit. So yeah, this, you know, we thought we need to at least mention this because this is very large news in the fantasy and science fiction space. That's important to be aware of. The story is kind of ongoing. Neil Gaiman has responded to that article, which I will point out, this is the first time Gaiman has said anything really online since that initial accusation went out last July. You can read his response on his blog. I found it a little pale for the breadth of the things that these women are saying, and it's a bunch of women who did not know each other making very similar accusations. So yeah, that's the nutshell for this. Is Neil Gaiman, you know, he's in a pretty bad place right now, honestly. It's kind of burned his reputation a little bit because this stuff stretches back decades, and like one of the worst kind of stories in the Vulture article is he was in his 60s and he basically made passes at like a 20-year-old nanny who his wife had hired, and that spiraled into a bunch of really bad encounters, some of which happened like while his 4-year-old son was in the room. Like it is pretty messed up, a lot of those accusations. He says he denies he doesn't accept that there was any abuse. Time will tell where everything lands on this, but yeah, we thought we at least needed to touch upon this because it's very large news in our space this week.
Bubo, it didn't used to be behind a paywall, the Vulture article, and don't tell anybody I told you this, but if you open an incognito window and then copy paste the link in there, that might let you read it without having to paywall. Maybe not. Vulture would have a strong enough block.
Yeah, so you can also read not a large summary, but our kind of similar summary to what we're giving here on winteriscoming.net. If you go to like the books tab on the site, we did write about this, and we did write about Gaiman's response. I paid for the paywall so I could read the article because it was paywalled for me when I went to read it too.
It wasn't for me, FYI. I just got to read it. I didn't use I didn't use work on it, I swear. It just popped up for me.
I don't know whether that means you're lucky or I'm sorry, because yeah, like Andrew Haley says in the chat, which hello Andrew, good to see you as always. Yeah, man, that Neil Gaiman stuff is very disgusting and horrible.
Yeah, it's a lot of things coming together. It's the power disparity. It's the fact that a lot of these people worked for him. It's the fact that a lot of them were fans of him. It's the sexual acts described themselves. It's the not involvement, but just the proximity of the very young kid being there and how he's kind of picking it up. It's the way that it seemed to happen over and over a long period of time, like a recurring
pattern. We're talking decades.
Really stopped.
Yeah.
The fact that his wife, Amanda Palmer, seemed to be, again, not like abetting it exactly, but involved in the cycle, like as someone who kind of has contact with him and then maybe plays a role in keeping them silent by paying them off or having them sign NDAs in sort of a kind of sympathetic way, but also part of the cycle, I would say. It's very, very bad. it puts you back in the mind of the Me Too days when people like Harvey Weinstein or Matt Lauer, others who had been doing things for a long time without interruption were coming to light and
Yeah.
then getting essentially, I mean, in the extreme cases, sent to prison, and in other cases, just exiled from show business, basically, or any
Yeah.
business that they're in. It seems like we don't know what's going to happen. We're not sure if this will result in legal challenges. I don't think there are. Are there yet? I don't believe so.
So with the legal challenges, I think the Vulture article said there are not any charges being pressed against him at this point. I know
Mhm,
that one of the women, the person who was working as a nanny in Australia, she had filed a police report.
mhm.
The police threw it out. Uh,
Oh,
I know that another one, it said in the Vulture article, had just filed a police report last year alleging that he raped her. So yeah, it is. I don't know that legal action will happen. It will be interesting to see how this all shakes out for him professionally, personal life, whatever. Because again, he is in the midst of kind of a very bitter like custody battle with Amanda Palmer.
disgusting.
Um, but yeah, I think so. Andrew said something that I think is interesting. The sad thing is that I love his work, but that doesn't change how I feel about this. And it's a hard thing, right? Like we've talked about this separating the art from the artist before. Um, and where do you draw the line with that? And
Happens.
can you draw a line with that? Do you think, like Dan, you love the Sandman? Like, is this going to impact how you feel going into watching season 2 of that show?
What? A Neville of the Sandman. Always the worst thing he ever wrote. No, I mean, Hollywood's kind of already responded by
Yeah.
even before this article. Basically, all the shows that Neil Gaiman was associated with that are adapted from his work, or that he was a big part of producing, are being reduced or canceled. So, Good Omens was cut down from we get a full third season to we will have a 90-minute super episode. There have been rumors that the Sandman might end with his upcoming second season rather than adapt the full thing. If I didn't believe those before, I probably do now.
Yeah.
Like, if they weren't planning to end it, if the second season was to be season 2 of 5 or 6 or whatever, it'll probably just be season 2 now. So, uh, God willing, they find a way to end it in a satisfactory way. I mean, you can separate the art from the artist. I read Harry Potter like not that long ago. It's still good. Yeah, it's possible to do it. I mean, depending on context, right? It's like
Yes.
if the work itself isn't overly contaminated, I
Yeah.
don't I like examples spring to mind, but they're all silly, so I'm not going to bother with them.
I've got a good
Um,
one.
okay, go ahead.
Um, Marion Zimmer Bradley is one who comes to mind for me. Where I don't know, are you familiar with what happened with Marion Zimmer Bradley?
I wasn't she the one who like talked with her fans a lot and then one fan accused her of lifting an idea from a fanfic that they wrote to write her book, and that was a whole mishigas?
Yes. That was a separate Michigas. Yeah, that basically
Mishigas.
I don't remember the exact details of that, but yes, there was a snafu with a fanfic that was something she had been planning to write, and she didn't approve fanfic. But the real controversy with Marion Zimmer Bradley is that she and her husband, I believe, were convicted of sexually abusing their kids. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, this
Way
was
worse.
way worse. And the thing is, when you so I liked Marion Zimmer Bradley. She wrote The Mists of Avalon, is kind of her most famous book.
Oh, I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, Mists of Avalon. She wrote a sci-fi series called Darkover. And the thing that I found is after I found that out about Marion Zimmer Bradley, there's a lot of I don't want to say weird sexual stuff because I'm not trying to shame it, but there are a lot of like odd or boundary pushing sexual things in her books. And once you know that she was
Sure.
like doing very terrible things to her children like while she was writing these books, it's that to me is the point where it's like I can't separate this art from the artist anymore because I see the
Yeah, I
artist's
hear you.
crimes in the art, as it were. And I think I'm going to probably feel the same way with Gaiman because, like, The Vulture article draws a comparison to Calliope from the
From the
Sandman,
Sandman.
which is the muse who was raped repeatedly by this guy who wanted to be a famous author. And then Dream comes and gives him a bunch of nightmares and stuff like that. And those sorts of stories, it is going to be very hard to look at something like that the same way after knowing that Gaiman has been doing this stuff for this long. And then of course there's what Julie's saying, but you don't want to support someone like that even via their work, or I wouldn't want to anyway. I agree with that. I mean, that's the same reason like I don't really buy into any J.K. Rowling things at this point. Like I just don't want to support them. Or same kind of for like Orson Scott Card. Even though I like some of Orson Scott Card's books, I don't really. No. Orson Scott Card's still around, I believe. But I don't go out of my way to. I don't support Orson Scott Card by buying his books anymore, really. Even though he does have some works that I liked. I think Speaker for the Dead is pretty incredible book, honestly. But once they're using that platform for terrible shit. It's a lot.
There's limited things you can like as an individual. Your choices are if someone who you really admire and whose work you love does something in their personal life and is exposed as having done horrible things, objectionable things, really the only thing you can do is not support them. You have no control over the bigger question, which is like, how will society, how will the industry treat this person? You just don't. You have control over that. So yeah, I'm not going to buy any more Neil Gaiman books in the near future. I doubt it.
Yeah,
I'm going to return this Sandman book I borrowed from my friend like 3 years ago and forgot I had to give back. I'll give that back. As for the I'm going to guess that he's going to be basically excommunicated from show business. Is my guess. You never do know though. It's kind of proportional to how famous and impactful and beloved they were. I'm going to bring up another major celebrity who is no longer with us, but who is talked about to this day in very controversial terms and still beloved in many corners. I was surprised after the documentary about Michael Jackson came out, Leaving Neverland, where it kind of went deep into interviewing the now grown-up versions of the kids whom he allegedly sexually assaulted, which to me in very convincing ways, like I walked away from that being like, oh yeah, that guy had a lot of problems. For a while, I remember like I can't listen to a Michael Jackson song without getting creeped out. I will say though, the truth is time fades and they keep playing them like at the grocery store and stuff. And like I can't just not go into Jewel ever, and Rock With You is a bop. So I just kind of hop along and I'm fine with it. So it's weird how these things will play out in ways that you can control, ways that you can't control.
Yeah, I think that is very fair. I think the fact that it was the Michael Jackson stuff was all posthumous, right? Like it coming out.
I mean, yes and no, because again, this is a WiC disclaimer. We promise we won't get too distracted by this. There was a lot of stuff when he was alive, but that documentary I'm talking about came out after he had died. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a fair question. I think the cultural impact of things like who asked about Sandman? Kirsty Angel said, "What's going on with Sandman? Is it still in production?" I think Sandman wrapped production. I think it's in
season 2. Yeah.
It's coming out
this year.
Yeah,
most likely, Kirsty, we will get a second season this year on Netflix, and that will very likely be the last one.
You know how Netflix feels about canceling things. I have no doubt that they will probably cut ties to avoid the bad PR with this. I don't think Sandman is a big enough hit for them where they would be like really shooting themselves in the foot to axe it. And they already canceled Dead Boy Detectives.
I think
Good
there was
Omens
a
is getting
Nnedi Boys adaptation that I would not be surprised if that died on the vine now too.
That is supposedly coming out this year. That's on Prime Video. That's Anansi Boys is the spinoff to American Gods, which was also canceled and cut short. So why are we doing the spinoff? But that's a whole separate can of worms. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what happens with the adaptations in the coming years. I also do think like like publishing is a fairly small industry. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it's a while before we really see any written works from Gaiman again.
Sure.
But that depends on who would be willing to get behind him. But this is a pretty universally decried thing. I haven't really seen a lot of people, regardless of your political leanings, regardless of whatever else, not being like, that's real messed up, this is disgusting, and if it's true, he should probably be in jail. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the people that make up his audience are not the kind of people who will kind of be willing to accept this to be under the rug, is basically kind of the takeaway from this. He's probably done for at least for a long while, and if he gets charged something formal, then that could be worse for him, but we'll see.
Yeah, I do feel bad for the Sandman fans, like Andrew saying, I don't want to cancel because I love season 1, but at the same time, I get it, and my mind has kind of changed with this project. It's like, that's fair, and a lot of Sandman fans have been waiting so long for a good Sandman adaptation. But the flip side of that is all of this stuff has been going on during those years, so yeah, it's messy and not good for anyone, but again, important to discuss and see where it goes from here.
How do we segue out of this, Dan?
Well, okay, that is the traumatizing portion of our show. We got a petty beef, we got some actual real trauma shit that we had to talk about that no one likes talking about, but it had to be done. And now we're going to move on to fun stuff, I guess. Now we're going to go into our more normal segment of a show, which is talking about what we're watching, what we're loving, what we're enjoying. So let's take the Neil Gaiman hat off, throw it in the nearest fire and burn it. It can go away for the moment. And let's talk about what's on right now.
Just good vibes from here on out.
It's just good vibes. Yeah, I mean, not to say that the people in the next show we're going to talk about, Silo, are not also suffering trauma, but it is a fictional show.
Daniel, the season 2 finale of Silo airs this Friday, but you've already seen it. You thief.
I have. It's true.
So I got a hold of these screeners. And you're going to give us a bit of an early review and an early assessment of the season as a whole. I'm going to open, by the way, and say that I'm not watching Silo, this drama on Apple TV Plus about people in the future who must live in underground bunkers because something horrible happened topside. They've been living down there so long, nobody seems to know what.
Indeed.
I want to say that Apple TV Plus has great stuff, has been having great stuff for a while. I feel like because you've just been singing the praises of this show for so long,
it's great.
I assumed that you were in lockstep with the basic viewing public. It seems like, in general, a lot of fans think this season has been, if not a straight up letdown, not as strong as the first. It feels like you disagree with them and think they're all liars and cheats.
Yeah, mainly, pretty much. No, I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinions. I will say this is a different season, and I can understand some things people may or may not like. It is a slower moving season in some ways, which personally I don't mind. I am not someone who, unless the show is really dragging, look. I watched Lost when that shit was on TV. I am not an impatient viewer with stuff needs to be going every episode. I don't mind a good episode of setup as long as what I'm watching is engaging. So I have been really enjoying Silo season 2. It is a little more, to use an awful pun, siloed than the first season because we have Rebecca Ferguson's character, Juliet, is pretty much away from every other character except for one or two. Everyone from season 1 is a separate storyline than Juliet, and we're right now on the second to last episode is what aired last week, and they haven't crossed over yet. So yeah, what I would say is there are a few elements to this. One is it's a little slower moving. There are separate plot lines. The other is I don't know how it stacks up to the book. That is one thing I will say, because typically I'm in the book reader corner of let's really drill down into the adaptation of this thing and talk about how it stacks up. This is one instance where I am not in that corner because I'm just watching it as a viewer. I haven't read Wool yet, and I am just really having a great time with this show. I don't know, man. It's just been engaging. I just haven't really had complaints. I think the actors are great. I think the sets are really cool. They're doing a lot of stuff like repurposing sets because the silos look identical. So they're kind of like taking the sets from the one silo we're familiar with and then dressing them differently to be the rundown silo that Juliet is in. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And as far as the finale goes, that's hard because people are saying they maybe had issues. I've generally loved the whole season, so I also loved the finale. I think it does some interesting things, especially with the end. I think people are going to have opinions about the way the season ends. I know I do, that I can't talk about till next week because it doesn't air till Friday.
Can you at least tease if your opinions are positive, negative, tumultuous, mixed?
I would say positive mixed. I would say positive. I'm very curious to see what they do with season 3, because for people who know what's coming, who have read Wool and Shift and Dust, I think is the third book. The book series does some interesting things that I don't want to even talk about. But if you know what the deal is with the second book, Shift. I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Silo does with them in season 3. And I think they leave things in such a way that a lot of people are going to be wondering that for the intervening years, because in case you, erstwhile viewers and listeners, did not know, I'm sure I'm using that word wrong. Is that what you're going to tell me?
It means former.
Okay. I wish there was a version of that.
Lovely?
That meant, yeah, lovely. Sure. Yeah, we can go with that. Lovely viewers and friends and listeners. It has already been renewed for seasons 3 and 4. So they are finishing the entirety of the book trilogy by Hugh Howey. So yeah, Kirsty says, couldn't be any worse of a second season than House of the Dragon. It is not. I will say that much. I think Apple, House of the Dragon had standout episodes, but we have talked at length about our issues with it. I can't imagine Silo getting that kind of pushback, even if they're changing stuff, even if I assume some part of it is POVs, because, we get a lot of screen time for the people still in Juliet's original Silo. And I don't know how much the book did that at the same time. I think Silo season 2, it feels more consistent to me. And I think some of the actors, like Steve Zahn, plays this character Solo.
I love him.
He is giving like a career best performance, I think, where like, I didn't realize this. They apparently didn't even audition that. They were like, we want Steve Zahn for this part. And they like approached him and were like, will you please come play this character? And he said, yes. And he is just opposite Rebecca Ferguson for pretty much the whole season. And the two of them just are giving like ridiculously good performances. He's like very sheltered and anxious. He's lived in this vault. And by vault, I mean like a 1 or 2 room vault. It's not like the silo. It's like a tiny spot in the silo. He's been living there for who knows how long, and he's got all sorts of anxious tics and stuff because of it. Really, really spectacular performance from him. So yeah, I think if people have been enjoying season 2, they're also going to really enjoy the finale, and they will be left with questions, is what I would say.
I'll ask one more question about Silo before we move on from this. Since you've seen the finale, do you think people who have been a little let down by this season, who think it's a little slower, who think it's too siloed off, are their concerns addressed in the upcoming season 2 finale airing this Friday?
I want so badly to give a non-answer that's like yes and no, which I, for the
You
record,
can.
well, for the record, I think that's an honest answer. I think yes and no. I think those concerns are addressed. I think they will then have other concerns. So yeah, I think yes, but I think it's going to open a whole different can of worms than people are expecting as well.
All right.
So
How about Zach's question? What about answers? Will there be answers?
some. Zach says, will there be some answers? And I would say there will be some, Zach.
Like a good critic, we are dedicated to obfuscation
fair.
and vagueness.
That's right.
Someone brought up Outlander. Divine brought up Outlander. It's quite a big Friday, actually, because we'll have the finale of Silo, which a few people are watching. We'll have the season 7 finale of Outlander, which a lot more people are watching, I assume. Actually, I shouldn't say that. And then we'll have the premiere of Severance on Apple TV Plus, which is another really great sci-fi show that I feel like has a bigger foothold than Silo does so far as Apple TV Plus sci-fi series go. A major Friday, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun Friday. I've watched Severance. I've watched the first 3 episodes now, and that show's great. It's surreal. It's spooky. It's funny. It's relevant in a way that maybe a more far-flung sci-fi show like Silo has a harder time being, because it's set in our world. It's about the drudgery of modern work. And again, funny. God, I wish more shows were funny. People are going to like that one, I think. Victor points out Skeleton Crew finale aired on Tuesday. I watched that. Yeah, that was fine. The whole show was kind of like that, Victor, right? It was nice. It wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. I kind of like answered emails while I watched it, but it was fine. good for it.
Yeah, I haven't watched the finale.
It's not made for me. It's nice. It's nice. It wraps up this story in a way that will leave you saying like, "Aw." And
okay.
Then you'll move on. I liked it.
I can get behind that.
Yeah. And then we've got and then Silo finale, Outlander finale, and Severance premiere all on Friday. Things are dropping.
Yeah, it is definitely a big week for genre TV this week. Skeleton Crew, I like that you said, it wasn't made for me. That's kind of the thing I've kept coming back to with Skeleton Crew. Like, this is a show geared toward younger audiences, and it knows it. And I like that about it, which means I'm not like, I'm only going to be so critical of that, because I think it, I'm not a little kid. I can only gauge how effective it is at reaching them relatively, I guess. Outlander. So who asked if we were watching Outlander? Divine. I am not watching Outlander. I have seen Outlander. So I know Kirsty said lots of fans of Game of Thrones rate Outlander, but I haven't watched it yet. Outlander is a solid show. I watched the first 5 seasons of Outlander, and I, for the most part, really enjoyed it. I think especially some of the early seasons they aired around the same time as like Game of Thrones season 4. And it was one of the few examples of another like period piece sort of genre television story that were kind of on the same level, even though it's a different kind of story, because Outlander it's a time traveling romance that's very different than like a medieval political fantasy. But I think Outlander is incredibly successful at what it does, and you can just always bank on that it is going to be a quality watching experience. Outlander doesn't have bad seasons or even really bad episodes. I will say the thing that I fell off on was Outlander has a lot of sexual abuse, and it uses it in a similar way that a show like Game of Thrones used battle set pieces. And what I mean by that is they tend to be major turning points, like per season type thing. So like I'm talking like story structure, not like they're shot that way. Like story structure wise, those tend to be some of like the big episodes of Outlander, and then things spiral out from there. And I got to a point after that happening over and over for multiple seasons where I just decided it wasn't really my bag. But I will say, especially if you like romance stories, and especially like period piece romances, Outlander's totally worth giving a shot. And it seems like the new season has been really well received as well.
Yeah, it feels like it's people are looking a lot more. I think Julie said that it's back to its old self. I'm glad for fans of that. A bunch of folk have mentioned From, this MGM Plus show, which I am not that familiar with, although I know off the top of my head that it's set in a nightmarish town in the United States that traps those who enter. The unwilling residents strive to stay alive while plagued by terrifying nocturnal creatures from the surrounding forest as they search for secrets hidden within the town beyond in the hope of finding a way out. I don't know where I picked that up.
Man.
It sounds cool, but who has MGM Plus?
That is totally the reason I haven't watched From. And, you know, this is also why, like, Beacon 23, in my opinion, got the shaft. So, like, people who like Silo, if you like Silo and you are watching From, you should look and see if Beacon 23 is still on MGM Plus, because that was written by the same guy who wrote the Silo books, Hugh Howey. But they kind of, you know, who hasn't... MGM Plus is not a very large streaming platform, I don't think. I still don't get why they didn't roll it into Prime Video, because Amazon owns MGM.
Oh yeah,
but that's a conversation for another time, probably.
Well, I mean, I like that you guys recommending it. I will try and check it out. I had the screeners for The Winter King. I let's check it out because it sounds cool and people are liking it. I enjoy it. I also watched Creature Commandos. Whoever brought that up, and yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was decent.
You liked it?
I liked it. I've always had a weakness for those DC animated things.
Yeah.
It was kind of limited. It was one of those stories that kind of got so twisty. I think it forgot what it was about by the end of it, but it was still fun. And James, and it's a good preview because James Gunn's going to do these new big DC movies. So it pays to watch this to see what he's about. And that man loves his freakish outcasts. He just loves them.
They're relatable.
Maybe loves them too much, to the point where what they're doing doesn't make a ton of sense. I do kind of wonder, is he going to turn Superman into like a freaky weirdo who, I don't know, can't fit in and he's isolated and just bizarre and loves pop culture references? We'll see when that movie comes out in July.
Well, it'll be interesting because, like, you know, I don't think outcast when I think Superman, but he's also
invalid.
It's not invalid. Like, from a certain angle, it also does make sense for that character as the last surviving son of Krypton or whatever. Like, I could see a James Gunn angle into that. So yeah, I'm curious too. So I'm trying to think of what else I've been watching. I've been watching Mythic Quest, which is on Apple TV, which is that show is so funny. It's about a video game company, kind of like modeled after Blizzard, who made World of Warcraft. It's got Rob McElhenney as like the egotistical head of the company who like puts his own avatar in the game and stuff like that. A lot of the actors on his team are very funny. Craig Mazin, the showrunner of The Last of Us, pops up. He plays a video game tester, and he's just a giant asshole. It's a very funny role to see Craig Mazin in, because he's like stony faced, just like being super pretentious and a jerk to everyone. Which, if you've seen interviews with him, that is not at all what Craig Mazin is like in real life. So yeah, Valerie, Mythic Quest for the win. Mythic Quest has been a great time. I'm on season 2 of that. Seems to be dropping off a tiny bit in season 2. But I'm still, you know, it's nice to have a show you can just put on and not have to like dissect seriously. And Mythic Quest
Apple TV. I probably will watch it because I like a good comedy. I was watching Apple TV Plus that show from the Bob's Burgers guy, Central Park, where it's like Bob's Burgers, but it's on Apple TV Plus. It's an Apple TV Plus original, where it's an animated comedy, but every episode has songs in it. It's just a big musical episode. Fun. It was good. Again, like a 3-season show, kind of came and went. So Apple TV Plus has built up this like little solid library. I also tried Shrinking really briefly, but it was because my mom recommended it. It seemed very mild, kind of like
Okay.
potato salad kind of show, like an outdoor barbecue, and everybody brought the same dish.
Was
Nice. It is nice though.
potato salad. So can I ask how many episodes you've seen? Because I as well tried Shrinking, and I've only watched the first episode, and I didn't go back to it yet. Whereas I've watched like a season and a half of Mythic Quest.
I watched 2.
Okay. Yeah. So I stopped kind of in the second one. So I can see what you're saying about that. I've heard a lot of people recommend Shrinking, but I haven't been able to get into it yet. Maybe we both need to give it another shot. But there's other stuff on Apple TV. I also finished season 2 of For All Mankind, which remains really good.
So you're rolling on that.
Rolling on that, rolling into the 3rd season, the 90s Nirvana season, which has the moon or Mars, which has Mars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Elon.
Oh, is Elon in it?
The obvious Elon stand-in.
Fun. Yeah. So I'm enjoying that show a lot. I need to shout out a book that I've been reading. So I picked up the new Nnedi Okorafor book. Nnedi Okorafor, really prolific, well-known, award-winning speculative fiction author, writing like African futurism and African Jujuism. Death of the Author. Have you heard of this book, Dan?
I think because you talked about it a lot.
Okay. So this book is so freaking interesting. I'm really enjoying it. It's one of those books where you read like a chapter or two and then you have to sit and digest it. And it's almost like a mix between like literary fiction and sci-fi, where it's about this paraplegic Nigerian American author who has a run of bad luck, gets fired from her job teaching, her book gets rejected. She writes this random sci-fi book. She doesn't even like sci-fi, and it takes off and it changes her life in some really interesting ways. And the thing that I'm enjoying so much about this is Nnedi Okorafor kind of like mixes like viewpoints. So like there are interviews with people who knew that author, the main character of the book. There are chapters from the main character's perspective. And then there are also chapters of the book she wrote, which is like a sci-fi book about robots. So it's a very like meta fiction type book. It's also like heavily autobiographical to Nnedi Okorafor's own life. This book is so good. I can already tell it's going to be one of the best books that I read this year.
She's an author I want to get into,
good.
but I just got to put her on my list and get through my, as you would say, TBR pile. And then
yeah, which is fair. There are always more books. But yeah, I had to shout that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie wants to talk about Wheel of Time. I think there's a couple of Wheel of Time things in this week's lightning round. Should we get on that?
We should. We should supersize the Wheel of Time one or something. We should take an extra minute because it's exciting news. But yeah, we're going to talk about Wheel of Time right now.
All right. Let's hit it. Daniel, who goes first?
That, Dan, is a wonderful question that I do not have an answer for. So why don't you ask me first?
All right.
I think that's the way this is gonna kind of shake out.
Okay, 20 seconds on the clock for the WiC News Lightning Round. Daniel.
Yes.
Rory McCann, who played the Hound in Game of Thrones, who we haven't seen much of in the past few years, is probably, according to reliable rumor mongers, going to play the Sith Lord Balon Skoll in the 2nd season of Star Wars Ahsoka, replacing Ray Stevenson. Lots of people name their lightsabers lots of cunts.
Yes. What did you just say? I think I might have misheard what you just said. But yeah, so Ray Stevenson, he is a phenomenal actor. He passed away just before the 1st season of Ahsoka aired. His character was very, very cool, and a lot of people liked him. We weren't sure if he was going to get recast or they were just going to write him out. They are recasting him most likely with Rory McCann. I'm curious to see it. Those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
All right. This next one. So Dan, you have a theory that The Last of Us season 2 will probably premiere on Sunday, April 13th. Tell us more.
It's got to be because they're going to air the White Lotus season 3 in the near future, and then that runs for I think 9 episodes. And then the way HBO works is they air the premiere of their next big show the week after their last show ends, and it's always on Sunday nights. So the White Lotus, we know that's going to end, and we know that's what's coming in April. Ergo, April 13th, Sunday, Last of Us season 2.
Nice.
All right, Daniel. Witcher season 4 is coming out this year, and there will be a lot of flashbacks.
Yeah, so there was a report this week from Redanian Intelligence, general spy website that keeps tabs on The Witcher, that child actors had been cast for a few of the characters who are like Geralt's companions. So we're most likely going to see some flashbacks to their childhood. I think that works fine. Having read those books, I think that totally fits with where the story is. So I'm for that. Curious. Dan... So the It spin-off television show, It Welcome to Derry, apparently has 3 seasons planned. Each one is going to go further back in time.
Yeah, I like this idea. Okay, so I can't shake the feeling this is going to be a good show, this It show. I feel like it's going to be good. Because again, I've read that book. Those sections they're going to adapt are huge. And I can see them filling out like 6 episodes, maybe not like a 10-episode season. They could probably do a good job with this and go further back in time into the origins of Pennywise, the crazy dancing traveling clown. I bet I'm going to like this. I have a theory. I'm going to like this. Daniel, Wicked star Cynthia Erivo, who you just saw portray Elphaba in Wicked, wants to play Storm of the... Oh, crap. Hey, Daniel, there's a new movie called...
I'll ask you about Cynthia Erivo.
Called In the Lost Lands.
Yes.
Based on a book by George R. R. Martin, or a short story, coming out March 7th.
Yeah, so this is from Paul W.S. Anderson, who did the Resident Evil movies. His wife / action star, Mila Jovovich, is the main character, Gray Alice. Dave Bautista's in it. It's based on a George R. R. Martin short story from the 80s. And it looks like a fun, it looks like a Paul W.S. Anderson movie. So fun action horror coming out March 7th. Dan, I know you like to talk about Cynthia Erivo. That is okay. We left this on here because I wanted to hear your opinion on it. Apparently, so that's the actress who played Elphaba in the new Wicked movie. She wants to play Storm of the X-Men.
I mean, don't you imagine we're going to start hearing castings about the X-Men pretty soon? It's got to be soon. Like, they want to cast them in movies. And they're going to have Wolverine, Storm, etc., and so forth. Why not? I think she should pull it off. Because Storm's got like a regal bearing. I could see it. So if whoever they cast, put her in the running. Sure.
Yes.
Hey, okay, our first of a couple Wheel of Time things. This is the funnier one, or the weirder one. I never thought I would see it. Jimmy Fallon on his show dressed up as the false dragon Logain from the Wheel of Time.
Yes.
In like a contest to see which actor he looked like. He looks a little like him.
He does. So viewers sent in these like, does Jimmy Fallon look like this person? And someone sent in this frame of Logain. And yeah, he got dressed up right there on the spot. So he was clearly prepared to dress up as one of the 4 people thought that he looked like. And the audience voted for Logain. So, the Wheel of Time is breaking into the popular culture in a way that I love to see. And all right, our final one. Hi there, Arosa in the chat. Welcome. First time catching a live. Good to see you there. All right. Dan, you should take your time talking about this. Don't let the buzzer shame you.
We can talk together.
More to say.
Just hit it.
So there were new castings announced today for the Wheel of Time season 3. 5 new cast members. You want me to read them? You want to read them?
Let's do it back and forth. Okay. It's
nice.
Isabella Bakuri as Fail Bashir.
Yeah, fail. And apologies. I'm sure we're gonna butcher some of these names. Nukaka Coster Waldo as the Isle Wise One Bear. That's pictured on the right in the picture we have.
Salome Gunnars Dottir as Melanie.
Yep, another Isle Wise One. Bjor Landberg as Ruark, who is an Isle clan chief.
That one was easy. And
It was.
finally, Sienov Makodi Lund as Melindra.
Yes.
Who I recognize that name. Was she like a... Who was Melindra again?
I don't want to spoil things. So the show is changing Melindra a little bit. She is a survivor of Malkir, which is the nation Lan was from, who's been adopted by the Aiel. So she's a maiden of the spear in the book.
Yeah, it's cool to see. I mean, I remember people like Fail and Bane, definitely, from the book. I just read The Shadow Rising not too long ago. And again, what I like about The Wheel of Time is the way that it seems to be committed to casting this enormous cast of characters in full or close to in full. It tells you that they really want to do this story right and want to give you the full breadth of what the books have, which is exciting. I hope they don't cancel the show after this season so they can continue to do that.
Hear, hear.
Oh yeah, as you shouldn't have. What do you think, Daniel?
Thank you. I think this is really exciting. This was the first drop of a new so there's this thing in the Wheel of Time fandom called What Wednesday, where the Wheel of Time PR team releases new tidbits on Wednesdays and the fans get really excited. They put in the official press materials that this is the start of the new What Wednesday leading up to the show. So we're expecting like Wheel of Time news most weeks on Wednesdays from now on until March 13th when season 3 airs. Yeah, I think this is really exciting. I am rooting for the Wheel of Time.
Too.
And it's great to see a big ambitious fantasy show doing so well and doing, adapting its material in a different way because it has to, but in a way that makes it really clear they want to do right by it.
Yeah, I love it. It is the show to root for this year. It'll be here in March. Let's look forward to it. Anything else you want to say before we sign off for the week?
I just thank you, Dan, and thank you, beautiful viewers and listeners, not erstwhile. If you're erstwhile, how did we get here? For tuning in this week. This was a good show where we talked about serious stuff, we talked about fun stuff, and it was nice to experience it all with you.
We are here every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, 3 on the East Coast, noon in the California, and 1 on the mountains. Thanks for listening. We're also available in podcast form wherever they're available. If you get your podcasts, we're there. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Leave a $20 bill under your pillow. We'll come and get it. And we will see you here next week. Join the discussion. Looking forward to seeing you. Goodbye and good night.
Take care, all.